Part 1, Chapter 4 of Never Let Me Go, we start to see more of Kathy's relationship with Ruth. It's implied that at some point they grew apart. They weren't really friends initially. In the first page of Chapter 4, what I really wanted, I suppose, was to get straight all the things that happened between me and Tommy and Ruth after he grew up and left Hailsham. So here we'll say distant relationship. We don't know if something happened, but we will assume. Kathy's going to leave her role as a carer, and at this point we decided a carer is probably a nurse of some sort. They're trying to discover more about Madam, so if you come back to part 1 chapter 3, we talked about her gallery and what happens to these pieces of art that they create. So you may be asking yourself at this point, where are their parents? So remember, this is sort of like a boarding school, and if you're familiar with boarding schools at all, you don't see your parents at all. And I don't know if that includes contact or not, but we don't really hear about their parents at this point. We hear a little bit more about Miss Emily, so I'm going to add a little tab for her here. Miss Emily is the head guardian. She's older, and she lets the students get away with some things. So between Miss Lucy and Miss Emily, we're kind of puzzled about their role as a guardian. Miss Lucy at one point tells the students, "All I can tell you today is that this is all for a very good reason, a very important reason. But if I tried to explain it to you now, I don't think you'd understand. One day, I hope it'll be explained to you." So Miss Lucy seems to be held back by administration, maybe. We don't really understand, but she wants the students to know what's going on, in a sense. So that kind of leads me to these exchanges. So these exchanges are basically pre-owned miscellaneous items that are brought to the students that they can buy with tokens. So we'll say pre-owned miscellaneous items that come from where, and students can buy with tokens from sales. So essentially what happens is they have these sales with their art, and if somebody buys it, they get a token. They can then use these tokens at exchanges. And you might notice Ishiguro is going to make a lot of connections to music. Ironically, he wanted to be a musician when he was growing up, not a writer. So he makes a lot of connections to music in this novel, which we will talk about. But essentially, in this chapter, we see the relationship between Kathy and Ruth. Now, I mentioned before, Ruth kind of reminds me of Regina George from Mean Girls. So if you're familiar with that show or that movie, she knows she's the head girl of the group, and Kathy's kind of afraid of her in that way. So they aren't initially friends, and they kind of grow into friendship with each other. Another thing you might have noticed as we're reading is these stages. Kathy says, I think I was in senior 3. She kind of mentions infants, junior 2. So essentially what happens, instead of saying grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, grade 4, we have infants, junior, senior, and then they're divided into 3 groups. So it's really confusing. So it would be like junior 1, junior 2, junior 3, and Kathy's in senior 3, which means she would be in 6th grade in the US. So essentially this is middle school for these students. As we move into chapter 5, I want you to focus on kind of what Ruth mentions to Kathy at the end. She asks her to be essentially a guardian for a guardian. So Miss Geraldine, she asks her if she likes Miss Geraldine, and she says, well, you can be a secret guardian. So we don't really know what that means, but I want you to notice the relationship between Ruth and Kathy at this point.